欢迎收看《台湾抉择》，我是陈子妍。今天的权威访谈为您请到的是斯坦福大学胡佛研究所的研究员，也是印太计划的经理。同时呢，他也是这个在历次的重要的台湾的大选呢，他都有带团或是亲自到台湾去观选。非常的欢迎齐凯利博士 ，Dr. Templeman。
Thanks for having me.
Yes, all the polls are showing that this is going to be a very tight race. You know, as we all know, the DPP 赖清德 is leading, but not really in a bigger margin, and the KMT 侯友宜 is catching up, and also the TPP 柯文哲 is a distant third. So, were you surprised by this trend?
I wasn't surprised, actually. I thought I've been thinking for a long time that this would be a very close race. That the DPP was probably the favorite in this race, but that the KMT had a pretty good chance at storming back and being competitive and potentially even winning this election. And I haven't been surprised either by the TPP's recent struggles. I thought that their numbers were probably inflated or a little bit exaggerated. And so I'm not surprised to see them kind of fall back to earth.
Okay. Since you mentioned about the 柯文哲, and I think this summer he was in town. Mm-hmm. And you have the privilege, you know, to host him and had a meeting and a private meeting with him. So can you share some of the analysis, you know, the observations with us?
Sure. Well, one of the things that's striking about柯文哲is that he's a very unconventional politician. So his approach to interacting with people, his policies, his just general attitude when he's in public is quite a bit different from the KMT and DPP. And he also has a habit of just speaking very bluntly about political topics, where other politicians of the green and blue camps will tend to dance around an issue or provide some very kind of nice sounding but ultimately empty phrases or promises to the voters. And so Ke, to his credit, I think is pretty good about responding directly even to tough questions. I would also note, I can't really talk about what we said in private, but I will note that his public statements and his private statements are not really that different.
Oh,
his
really?
Private persona is not significantly changed from his public persona.
Yeah. So Ke is, I know his poll has been going down, you know, drastically, mm-hmm. and but I wouldn't say it's game over for him. But would you like to share your thoughts? Is he going to be a factor in this race?
I think he is, yeah. And I think one reason his numbers have dropped is that he was pulling a lot of pan-blue supporters earlier in the year. There were a lot of kind of deep, strong KMT supporters who, for various reasons, were not very enthusiastic about about Ho Yo-yi as the candidate, and they were contemplating the idea of voting for柯文哲as a protest vote. And then the negotiations between the two camps fell apart at the last minute, yes. And the three candidates all registered separately, and that, in combination with Ho Yo-yi choosing Zhao Xiaokang as his vice presidential running mate, appears to have brought a lot of those deep blue voters back to the KMT ticket.
Yes.
And they seem to be much more enthusiastic about Ho Yo-yi's candidacy now. So I think柯文哲has suffered in part because he's lost a lot of deep blue supporters, but he still has significant support among young voters, so
yes.
people under 40 especially. Yeah. And I think it's still an open question what those young voters do, and ultimately the election is going to be determined by how young voters choose And so they could stick with Ko-Wen-je. They could kind of drift back to the DPP, which they overwhelmingly supported in 2016 and 2020.
But not Hou Yu-yi.
Some of them could go to Hou Yu-yi. I think he's polling about 20-25% among young voters under 40. But I think that the most likely, or the third possibility, is that a lot of them just don't vote. So they tongping, they kind of lie down flat and sit this election out. And I think that is the biggest danger for both Ko-Wen-je and Lai Ching-te.
Okay, let's take a break. 让我们休息一下，我们等一下再继续跟齐凯利博士来谈。欢迎回来，我们继续跟齐凯利博士来谈。And we all understand that all the major candidates, they were in town during the summer, and I think that shows how important U.S. to them. And I want to know is because U.S. government has been paying great attention to the Taiwan's presidential election in the past, and there won't be any exception this year as well. But U.S. government is taking a rather neutral stand in terms of this year's election, and this is quite different from the past, because the U.S. government saying that taking a no preference to any of the candidates rather earlier than we expected. I'm surprised. Were you?
I was not surprised. I think the U.S. government's standard practice in dealing with Democratic partners and allies is not to take a position officially on the election. So in this election, it's the Biden administration has been very clear that they do not have a favorite, that they do not secretly want the DPP or the KMT to win, and they are most invested in seeing a free, fair, democratic election play out, and that the winner of the election be accepted as the legitimate next president of Taiwan. I'll say a little more about that. I think even privately, if you ask people in the Biden administration, really, if I asked you secretly, off the record, who would you prefer to win? I don't think there's a consensus in the Biden administration about which party would be better for U.S. interests. There's no kind of clear view on that. And I've heard from some people in the Biden administration, or people who used to be in U.S. government, that they secretly would prefer a DPP win. But I've heard from other people that they think a KMT win would actually be better for U.S. interests. So I think the U.S. representatives who speak on Taiwan issues are sincere when they say, we don't have a preference, we are neutral, and we just want to see a free, fair election play out.
But the thing is, the AIT chair, she went to Taiwan and not just talked to all the major candidates. She even stayed with them, during the campaign.
Yeah.
So I find that this is not usual at all.
Yeah, well, and she is an unusual person to hold that position as well. So we're talking about Laura Rosenberger here, the new chairwoman of AIT. She does not have a typical background for a chair of that body. She previously worked at the White House, and she's not a career foreign service officer. That's a very deliberate choice by the Biden administration to put somebody close to the White House and close to people on the National Security Council to keep a close eye on the Taiwan election and to try to communicate directly with each of the candidates about what U.S. interests are at stake in this election. And so she's been working, I know, very hard to try to develop a rapport, develop communication and a comfort level with each of the candidates, not just the DPP, not just the KMT, and not just Ko-Wen-je either.
So I guess this time, I think this election, U.S. is is not going to take side, but they make their position very, very clearly.
Yeah, well, the U.S. has a strong interest in ensuring that Taiwan remain a free and democratic place, that it remain prosperous. It's a key part of U.S. interests in the region, and it's a very important part of U.S.-China relations as well. And so the United States does have a big stake in seeing this election play out in a democratic way.
Okay, thank you for your, I think the great insight and share with us. So the election just will be held in 2 weeks, so we will see. 谢谢您的收看 and thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
下个礼拜四再见。